What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 9 of the Yak Chat, where we talk about all things kayaks, all things fishing, all the time. My name is Jay with Bearded Dad Fishing, and I'm glad you've taken the time to be here with us today. Now, this podcast streams live on YouTube and is available on demand on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So if you're watching live, we want to hear your questions, comments, and of course, those smart remarks. And if you're listening later on, make sure you drop a review wherever you are listening. So today's conversation might get a little dicey, and honestly, I'm 100% okay with that. We're talking about the single most important conversation when it comes to kayak fishing, which is safety. That should be your number one priority in every kayak angler's mind before rigging, before fishing, and yes, even before budget, because you can't put a price tag on being intentionally safe on the water. So to lead this conversation, of course, we got none other than Mr. KBF himself, Chad Hoover, who's joining us. And he's been kayak fishing since before most of us have even been around. So he's a huge safety advocate, and he's going to answer your kayak safety questions. Again, this is an interactive show. So if you're watching live, make sure you get your questions ready as well as those dad jokes, because at the end of the show, we'll be going over all of our submitted dad jokes in the funny or crummy segment. Before we get to the weekly catch up, though, I want to thank our sponsors real quick. So first of all, we have Lead Time, who is a rock solid name in the lithium power industry. They've been around for many years, and they're made to be an affordable and reliable source of power for the weekend warrior kayak angler. Their brand new 12-volt, 100-amp-hour smart battery is equipped with Bluetooth, allowing you to hook it up to your phone, monitor the usage, and checking it while you're out fishing. So you can check right on your phone how much power you have left while you're out there on the water, which is amazing. And at $300, honestly, it's a game changer. So I've included their link in the show notes. If you're watching the video, it's in the description down below. So make sure you use discount code BDF6 for 6% off your entire order. And of course, we have Humble Imprints to thank as well. They are the official custom apparel sponsor of the Yak Chat. And they create all types of custom t-shirts, hats, hoodies, pens, mugs, stickers, whatever you need with your custom logo right on there. And the best part of that is that 10% of all the net proceeds benefits families and children in the foster care system. So again, check them out at humbleimprints.com. The link will be in the show notes. So real quick, the weekly catch up is, if you guys already don't know, make sure you join us, Kayak Fishing Dads, on Facebook and Discord. So we just started a Discord server for Kayak Fishing Dads. It's a great place to go. So if you maybe like Discord a little bit better, that's the place to be. I'm still new to it, so I'm getting the hang of it, but it has a whole different vibe. It's almost like an instant chat where you can just chat at any time with other guys that are on. So it's really cool. So if you're a kayak fishing dad, make sure you like this video, hit the like button, and let us know in the comments. All right. So next thing, of course, we have the Knucklehead Bass Fishing Series. We're basically halfway through for the series. So we got May out of the way. June is almost done. So we only have July and August, 2 months for you to get your chance to fish on my team in Alabama for $10,000 in prizes. All the details of how it works, what those prizes are, they're going to be in the show notes down below. So let me show you guys where we're at so far for Team Bearded Dad. So this is the landing page for Team Bearded Dad. Real easy to get to. If you go to fishingchaos.com and just go to tournaments, and then you're going to type in right here, Bearded. And you're going to see your boy pop up, Team Bearded Dad. All right, so we scroll down to the bottom. As we see for May, Mac Toon took the win with 108 inches. So he's going to be, he's the first team member for Team Bearded Dad, and he's going to be down there in Alabama fishing Gunnersville and Wheeler. For June, we have Jonathan Miller in the lead with 105.5 inches, Rick Peters with 93.5 inches, and Joe Vacanti with 90.25 inches. So we still have a week left, so anything can happen in that week. 7 days is a long time when it comes to tournament fishing. So don't be surprised if there's some big upset, but those are some big numbers. So since there's only a week left, now's the time to get signed up for July. You see here, we only got July and August left, so we're running in to the halfway point for the Knucklehead Bass Fishing Series. So super excited about that. Make sure you guys join in. All the information for what the prizes are, how it works, what the rules are, all that stuff I've linked in the show notes and the description if you're watching this video. All right, so I'm done blabbing. I want to bring these guys on, bro. We got the homie Juan Orta from Cap and Hooks joining us, and Mr. Chad Hoover himself. What's up, gentlemen?
What's up, y'all?
What's up, bro? Yo, good to have you again, Chad, man. I appreciate you coming on, dude.
It's like I got the weakest beard game in this whole thing we got going on right here. So,
yo, I mean, you got to work on it for when we go to Alabama for the Knucklehead.
Yeah, the only problem for me is if I grow it out, I just look more ancient. You know what I mean? It just gets wider and wider the longer it gets.
Yeah, bro. Effect. I know. Well, you know what? I gotta have the bearded paddler on here and like Alex Rudd and like do like a beard seminar, because I just started hair drying my beard and it gives it like this epic kind of stoic look. But before that, it would grow this way. It still does. Naturally, it grows this way. So I hair dry it and I comb it down, and that's how I get this.
Yeah. Like I said, though, if I grow mine out, it looks like a face halo. It just gets white. And you know, when you play baseball, you have to put black under your eyes to get rid of the reflection. But when I grow my beard out, if I look down and my PFDs right here, it blinds the shit out of me. So I cut it off about right here. It's my max.
That's smart. I guess in the way I pinched it with my PFD zipper. That was not fun.
Yeah, I've done that before too.
Bro. Yeah, so we're going to talk about safety, bro. I'm really excited about this because I know you're passionate about safety. I saw, at least on our Facebook group this last week, 2 or 3 people post this article about, I guess, fatalities are down amongst anglers and like water safety in general in every area except for kayakers and like paddleboarders and small vessels. And I mean, we had this plan before I even read any of that, so it's really timely. But we want to avoid that, man. And we see all the time in the news all this type of crazy stuff happening to our brothers out there that are fishing rivers, fishing cold weather, whatever it is. So I mean, tell us. I guess you don't need an introduction. Everybody knows who you are, bro, Mr. KBF. But tell us like why. I guess why you're so passionate about safety. I know a little bit of your past has to do with, right? And when you were in the military, you worked a lot with safety.
No, I didn't just work with it. I was like, if you see this patch right here, I was actually a rescue swimmer. So
no kidding.
I got to see firsthand, we call it SAR, search and rescue, but it oftentimes becomes more search and recovery. So I've seen it from the standpoint of going out on a search, seeing the family at the boat ramp, distraught because their family member didn't come back. I ran into a kid at the boat ramp. I say kid, he's about 23, 24 years old last fall. Actually, it was kind of leading into winter. And I said to him, man, you guys out there running in those duck boats, really shallow, need to be wearing a PFD, No. And it was creepy because 2 weeks later, I'm looking at the news and a kid falls out of a boat. Now, it didn't have to do with running. They were actually trying to get from a boat into a kayak. And he tried to get into the kayak from the boat and flipped over and literally never came back up. And then when I saw it on the news, it was that kid that I had just literally talked to 2 weeks before that. And then you get to see his sister posting on Facebook, his mom posting on Facebook. And you just think about how much of a impact, a domino effect that has on not just the life of the person that was lost, but the other people, in their life. And so like I said, in my career, I did a lot of search and rescue. I pulled a lot of bodies out of the water, and more not alive than alive. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, because of ignorance, not knowing any better, because of stupidity. And it's sometimes even a combination of the two. just random stuff. And, there's lots of arguments on every side of the equation, that if you're, well, I'm fit. My son does this all the time. I'm young. I'm fit. I don't put myself in those situations. I've legitimately seen people look one way, a boat wake is coming. They didn't even hear the boat go by, make a cast, the wake catch them off guard. They step wrong, fall out the boat, down there, knock themselves out. And then if I wasn't there, it would have been a big problem. And so, we've all seen guys like Gene Jensen, who's very experienced, run into a stump on Caddo and go out the front of the boat, had his PFD on. A lot of those things can be compounded if you don't have your PFD on. We just finished up the Smallmouth Championship online series. Called the guy to congratulate him, and he goes, "Hey, man, did you see my video?" And I was like, "No." He said, "Yeah, dude, I almost died on the river. They don't have a horn or anything that announces the release, and they started releasing. The water rate rose 6 to 8 feet in a matter of minutes, washed me down the river, flipped me over. If I didn't have my PFD on, I'd be dead." And so I've had the conversation with a lot of people, and about, I want to say 12 years ago, I heard a number, and I took that number and I put it in my phone, and I just started keeping up with it. And as of this week, counting the 3 that died in Virginia and 4 that died in Pennsylvania, and then 1 more that died in Michigan, we're up to 268 people that I know of that have died in kayaks fishing because of not wearing a PFD. Not just counting all the ones that have passed away for various reasons, or whatever, but like literally weren't wearing a PFD, 268 of them. Yeah. Think about that, and then sit down and try to name 268 people.
Wow.
Go to a restaurant and look at the capacity number when you walk in the front door, and they're very seldom over 200. And then just look around and just imagine everybody in that restaurant's dead. You know what I'm saying? And more importantly, think about coming back home to your family and the other people in your life that you owe it to, even if you're not worried about it for yourself, it's just one of those things to me that's a no-brainer. But everything I think starts with the PFD, and much like our buddy just said there's more to it than just the PFD. There's the safety aspect of it. I've also heard every argument. Oh, well, where I fish, it's hot, and I'm more likely to die of heat stroke than I am from, the kayak wearing the PFD. So I make the conscious to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
There's no way.
That's like the people that say I don't wear my seatbelt. That's like people that say I don't wear my seatbelt because I don't want to die in the car. Like
zero chance.
Yeah.
That you're going to be more likely to die of heat stroke or whatever because you're wearing your PFD. If you're going to die of heat stroke or heat stress, you're going to do it without the PFD just as much as you are with the PFD. So that argument is moot. And there's a whole bunch of them that are moot. Yeah. I don't care if you wear an inflatable or a standard PFD. I'd rather you wear a standard, type 1. But at least if you're wearing an inflatable, you're wearing it and you don't have a PFD stuck behind your seat or behind your crate or inside your kayak and say, well, I'll have all I have to have, to be legal. I always think it's funny when people make the legal argument, but they're the exact same people that are like, government's not telling me what to do. So let me get this straight. No. You're one of those government ain't telling me what to do people, but at the same time, you're not wearing your PFD because the government tells you don't have to. What?
No. So what are some of the best arguments? Because these people that are anti-PFD, like they're really stout in their argument. Like they're not moving. I've noticed a lot of times like it gets heated in a lot of the Facebook groups between the PFDers and the non-PFDers. So besides trying to sway them, like what's a good way to just have the conversation without people getting all defensive about it?
Well, I'll just be honest with you, man. realized that. So one time when I was about 22 years old, I had come home on leave from the Navy, and I ran into this guy from high school that everybody knew was a dumbass. And I see him over in the corner of the parking lot. He waves me over. I pull over there and we get out and we start talking. We start talking about something, and we're arguing over something, and it's physically obvious we're arguing. And my papa drives into the grocery store parking lot because he actually worked at that grocery store at that time. So he looks over and he sees me arguing, and I go inside, and he said, "Hey boy, come here. What you doing out there arguing with that boy for?" I said, "Well, sir, he said this and this and this." He said, "All right, stop."
Ooh.
I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes,
Say that again right after you said stop, because it got chopped up on us.
He said, "Stop. Everybody in this town knows that boy's an idiot. But you know what they see when they see you arguing with him?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "Two idiots arguing. So first of all, don't argue with idiots. But most of the time, when I see those conversations, especially when they start going rampant on the kayak bass fishing group, and we've got a big group, so that conversation comes up more frequently than it does a lot of places. I just let it run, because I firmly believe that the people who see the people arguing against it realize how stupid it is. And then therefore people are being swayed towards it by the stupid arguments of the people arguing against it. And therefore the people arguing against it are advocating for it. Right. I remember one time watching Vinny Testaverde play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he threw 3 interceptions for touchdowns, and I'm a Saints fan. And I remember the announcer at the time said that the Saints coach should have given Vinny Testaverde the game ball, because he had more offense for the Saints than we did, right? And I thought that's a similar analogy to these people who run around arguing for against wearing PFDs or arguing for not wearing them. It's just like, if you'll just shut up and let a vegan talk, they'll talk you into eating meat just because of the stupid argument they make against it. If you got to do all of these things to get to a plant, to make it to the point that you can eat it, to do enough to it to get it to the point to be enough protein to be sustainable, you just convinced me I should eat meat. So to be honest with you, the arguments against PFDs are some of the best arguments for them. And the advocates against PFDs are actually, whether they know it or not, some of the best advocates for it, because they just sound stupid.
Yeah. I have yet to hear a smart one. And usually it's guys with just don't have that much experience. I've always been a strong swimmer, and a lot of guys are, and that's fine. But it's the stuff that you're not ready for. I've up by my house in Nakamixon, there's been guys that have had heart attacks out of their bass boats, and they fall into the water. Or you slip out when it's on a frosty morning and you slip on the carpet or whatever it is, man. Like, a lot of things happen.
I always love the strong one argument, because I promise you, 99, the strong swimmer argument. I'm a strong swimmer. I promise you, about 99% of the people that fish out of a kayak, if we got within 100 yards of the bank and I said, "Hey, flip out of your kayak and swim to the bank, I'll give you $1,000," I'd never pay it out. Ever.
I believe that.
People do not realize how hard it is to swim in gear, in clothing, and all this other stuff. But throw in a freaking treble hook getting caught in your pants leg. Throw in, insert anything here, compounding the problem, and you're going to have 10 times the amount of trouble. I heard one guy say, "I don't wear my PFDs, so if I flip out of my kayak, it makes it easier for me to get back in." I was like, okay, let's just say for the sake of argument, that was true. you could always survive the flip, swim up to your kayak, get a hold of it, take your PFD off, put it in the kayak, and then get in the kayak and put it back on. If your whole argument is, oh, my PFD obstructs me from getting back in the kayak, which, again, I'm not advocating that that's a smart argument either. I'm just saying that's one of the ones that I've heard, and it's just silly. It really is. And then the other one is you're leaving your life in somebody else's hands because of how many other idiots there are out there. People that, are not paying attention. People that are running pontoon boats where the nose is up like this because those boats are so big, they hardly ever break over. And by and large, a lot of times, especially on big lakes, they're looking back at the person they're towing. So the chance of getting run over, or not even run over, but waked and flipped and swamped are 10x in the summertime. You know what I mean? That's why I really become a big advocate of night fishing this time of year, because of the heat, because of the fishing's not as great. But boat traffic is a big part of it. There's just so much boat traffic to deal with, and so many idiots out on the water that I mostly get out there at night. It's cooler. The fishing's better, you know what I mean, and all those other things. And at night, I'm definitely going to be wearing a PFD, because if I did end up in the water, the flip side of that is it's going to be a minute before somebody comes along to help your boy out if I have an issue,
Yeah.
We went on a trip one time way back, Jay, and you already know what story I'm going to tell, and I've said this story a handful of times on here before, but we went out on a pontoon. I got some lures stuck on the bank there, and I thought it was a good idea because I was stressing they were new, and I spent my money on them. I wanted those lures back, so I went to go after them. And like everyone else said, and the whole argument, and mind you, I never considered the life vest scenario along with the kayak up until this point. I was a guy who I would go out with my canoe and I would have it within arm reach, or if it was colder weather, I would have it on. But there would be times I would take it off, admittedly. But yeah, so we're out there and I jump in the water, and I didn't think to take off my shirt, my wife beater. I didn't think to take off much of. I had my belt on. I had some like cargo style shorts, so they were a little thick. And getting into the water and getting to the point that I had to get to, not much of an issue. Getting up on the rocks, getting my first lure out was a bit challenging because there was nothing under me. So I was treading water with my hands in the air as I'm working this lure out of, and I did pretty well at that part. But it wasn't until I got done and everything was said and done. And as the gentleman said earlier in the comments, he had mentioned, making sure you're well nourished and hydrated. It was super hot that day. I wasn't hydrated enough. And I had like 3 monsters over the nighttime and had barely any sleep because I was so excited to get out with Jay to go fishing in the first place. And I didn't take care of myself. So after everything was said and done, I'm making my way back in, and we're in a boat rental, so we can't get too close to the bank anyway. So he's not far, or maybe only 15, 20 yards off of the bank. And on my way back to him, my hamstring started to cramp. And I started getting the most ridiculous Charlie horse. And at the moment that happened, like you mentioned, it was a beautiful day in the middle of the summer. So there was plenty of boat traffic and there was plenty of wind out there. So I wasn't anticipating that water splashing against this big old manly chest. You know what I'm saying? And as it started splashing up, it got in my mouth as I'm, and I wasn't anticipating that. And if it wasn't the right scenario, I would have had a backup, or I could have potentially have drowned if it was any other particular scenario. And ever since then, I've been a huge advocate for the PFD. And
I'm going to give you another one.
Back.
I'm going to give you another one that you just made me think of by telling that story. So we go out to do some safety training one time, and this is all SAR swimmers. Everybody in this group is in the best shape of anybody at that time. We were all ridiculously good shape. Okay. So we used to take the kayak to be the safety boat so that we didn't have to have a boat out there. And then one swimmer could jump out of the helo, swim over to the kayak, tag that guy out. He could swim over, get hoisted up. And we didn't have to go through all the BS of taking the safety boat. And then what I would do is I would take my own kayak so that when our training was over, I could just go fishing. And one of our star swimmers had been sitting in the kayak all day and had his legs sticking straight out. He rolls out of the kayak to go tagged out and tagged in to go get in the helo. And because he had been sitting in that position with that pressure on the back of his leg cramped up. And luckily he was wearing we wore shorty neoprene wetsuits, which are buoyant as hell. So he rolled over, floated, swimmer towed him back to the bank, and we basically took him out of the training rotation. But I'm going to throw two things at you real quick for this. Next time you decide that you're a strong swimmer, go swim without your legs.
Yeah.
Or just one of them. Just swim without one leg. Then I'm going to tell you something else that I see all the time, and I'm actually going to call out one of our knucklehead friends, Mr. Darren Wendell. Okay. Saw a video of him the other day fishing in jeans. And I started to comment on the video, but I was like, no, I'm going to wait till I've got a more opportune time to say something. Go try to get back in your kayak with some wet jeans on. Just try it. It's damn near impossible. When those things get wet, trying to pull one knee up when you do the push up and raise your body over is damn near impossible. They 4, 5, or 6 times themselves in weight.
Yep.
And when they get wet, they stick to you and limit your mobility like grim death. Okay.
Yeah.
And so little things like that are there's definitely things we need to talk about and think about outside of just the PFD for safety, like hydration formulas, not having free swinging treble hooks on your kayak. When I see people go out and I paddle up to them and they got 6 rods behind them and every rod's got a lure hanging off the tip. First of all, you're cracking the guide most of the time on your tip because you got that metal thing swinging back and forth, and you're going to end up with a cracked guide. And then you hear people like, oh man, my line keeps breaking. It doesn't make any sense. Do the Q-tip test on your first or second guide. You probably cracked it having that lure banging around. Think about every time you set the hook and all those rod tips have those little jigs and crankbaits and stuff clinking against that tiny little eye in that rod. And they're actually smacking the blank, swinging back and forth. And then later on, you break your rod setting the hook and go, all I did was set the hook and I broke it. Well, you probably broke it down the road before that. It showed up when you set the hook because that's the next time you put enough stress on it. But more importantly, I want you to think about this. Let's just say that this thing right here is your kayak, right? You got your rod sticking up and you flip it over. Then you grab onto the side of your kayak. Your feet are down here at the tips of these rods where all of those treble hooks are. And then if you hook yourself in the ankle of a treble hook with a fishing rod that's secured into a rod holder, it's a mother to try to get that thing disconnected at that point. The reason that I know this is because I did it. I actually swam up to another angler who had flipped their kayak and he couldn't get back in the boat. I had tried to go around the other side, throw him a rope and help pull him up on it. Long story short, I pretty much was like, all right, I'm going to get in the water. I'm going to get behind you. I'm going to push your ass up into the boat. And I swam up to the kayak and I had on the lightweight, breathable Columbia pants. And I swam up and I felt my leg go, katuk, and the freaking treble hook stuck in my pants. I pretty much had to go underwater, pull the rod out of the rod holder, then take the pants off, pick the pants up, cut the line off the lure, and then practically cut the lure out of my pants. So there's a lot more to this whole safety in the water thing with us as kayak anglers than what you think about with how good of a swimmer you are. A lot of the stuff like the side stagers that are coming out for yak attack, if you roll over and you got all them rods there with all them lures on that and you get hung up in them, you're sitting there trying to manually inflate a manual inflate PFD or trying to hold yourself up while you try to get your PFD on, you're done. Yeah. So a lot of that stuff we've got to think about from the standpoint of even a PFD may not prevent it, but a PFD is definitely your first line of defense,
And I want to add to that too. I think, like, when I think back of how when I was the best swimmer that I know that I was like 12. I was 13. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I was a kid when I was like the best swimmer. Once I got of like 16, 17, 18, all of us, we started worrying about girls and running around and chasing and doing dumb stuff. So when was the last time, if you really think about it, you great swimmer, you, whoever you are out there, when was the last time you really, you know what I'm saying? So, and most of us are over 30, right? So yeah, it's not realistic.
Yeah. No, for sure, man. And we'll get to some of those other safety equipment, safety gear, because for sure it's more than PFDs. But I wanted to start with that because that's number one. And then one of the, I think it was Cooler Lid that said he got his PFD before he got his kayak. And honestly, that's the way it should be, bro. Like that should be one after the other, and you should never go out without it.
Yeah.
But I want to go through some comments real quick. Bucktail Fishing, he wants to know if Chad's made any headway on his plate carrier PFD.
Yes. I've made some headway. I have a manufacturing partner.
No kidding.
The designs are
plate carrier PFD.
The designs are 75% there. There's going to be some prototype testing. There's going to be some tweaks, and then there's going to be some I'm going to do a thing called Design Out Loud. It's going to be called the BOLD strategy, the Build Out Loud design, where you build it out loud. You basically bring the community in once you start building it, and you say, here it is. Here's the initial deal. I'm going to call out some testers. I always think it's funny when people say, I'll volunteer to be a tester, like when a product's already done. Like, bro, what do they need a tester for? The shit's done. Like, they ain't changing anything now. You volunteer to be a customer, we'll buy one. But we're going to legitimately build out a tester deal where we pick the testers on a live stream, then we bring the testers back onto the live stream, and we're not going to be planting bullshit like, tell us what we want to hear, fake testimonials. It's going to be, take this thing out there. I'm not going to tell you anything. Go try it and, tell us what you really think. Tear the new asshole if you want to. And we're going to keep doing that until we've got the best possible product that we can. And then we're going to build it and go to market with it. It's every bit of my desire to the maximum extent possible to make it made in the USA. And if it means it's $179 to $219, that'll be what it is. But it'll be a PFD that you can make it yours by configuring how much stuff you want on there, how little stuff you want on there, how much buoyancy you want. There'll be a minimum requirement, and then there'll be the fact that you can add and subtract buoyancy to it if you want to. It's going to be the first hybrid PFD, in my opinion. In other words, I want to have panels that you can connect to it that are inflatable, as well as your standard. The plate part of the PFD1, if you don't know what we're talking about, is imagine a plate, and instead of the plates, that plate is high density foam that is your buoyancy. But we're going to do it with the really thin layers of foam that are stacked, so as you curve around your body, it kind of separates like a deck of cards, like this. So as you build the foam, as it curves, the end of the foam will bend. Will bend like paper. Okay. And so it'll conform and it'll shape and it won't be restrictive.
Wow.
And that's not something that is, new or universal. If you cut most PFDs open, they've gone to that instead of thick, closed cell, open cell foam. They've gone to more closed cell foam, thin layers so that it can bend and shape and conform. And we're going to follow that same principle. And then what we're also going to do is make it to where there's one standard front and back. The shoulder pieces and the side pieces will be what determines the size and the amount of buoyancy that you put in them to meet the minimum requirements for the weight windows for those sizes. And so we're pretty excited about that. But what I like about it the most is that it's going to be Molly, so that way you can put a chest pack on it if you want to, with a fold down for lures and for fly fishing. You could put a radio holder on it, put a light on it. I'm experimenting with every form of mount known to man I've only got a couple right here in front of me, but I'm literally experimenting with every possible type of mount for cameras, up to and including silly shit like this, so that we can make a camera integration that basically integrates right into the PFD, so that you've got that chest view for people that want to go out and create content. But the same connection and the same thing will be for a light, for rescue. It'll be for a bunch of different accessories. Going to work with line cutters to do an oversized line cutter. Thinking outside the box and doing some stuff like this, which is your standard, your standard tie down, but having a way to integrate that into your kayak so you can have your line on your whistle right now, which is kind of out here loose. Imagine if that was inside your PFD and you basically had it connected and you pulled down and locked it in place. But when you needed it, you pulled out on it and extended it out. And that gives you a lanyard. But when you're not using it, you can reach on the inside, pull it down and lock it in place, but it's right where you need it. So, I mean, literally, I'm sleeping and breathing this crap right now for the next,
I just thought as you were explaining that was so cool. I was thinking, and I saw this as like it was advertised differently. They're like these little cubed lights that you could put in many different places, and I've seen them advertised for the water, but as well for like emergency personnel, like first responders, police officers to put on their shoulders. So now that prompted me to think like, yo, would you have some sort of light integration that way? Or maybe something that's fall indicative, so that if somebody is, or moisture indicative, they got those new toys now that only go off in the water for kids. Something that if somebody's like in the water, something that could act like as a light beacon, maybe to help save them. I don't know. I'm just throwing some ideas out right now.
No, dude, and see, this is exactly why I want to use this bold concept to be the first company to design and build something out loud and not hide anything, like the patches built in for recognition, challenges, knucklehead stuff. Like we literally can build patch panels to where instead of having to jerry rig it like I did, you can build it yourself. Built-in tethers, things that are really going to make, one of the things that we see all the time is, for example, with the leaderboard, okay, you got your little identifier holder, right? That is adjustable. Same thing with catch. There's a leaderboard thing. Well, just what about a thing where you fold down the panel in front of you and you're holding the fish and you got the camera being held to lean forward. You take the photo by using voice control, right? And you say, or you do your release video. All right, I'm going to put my phone in my chest panel, fold it down, hit record. Now I've got one hand to hold the fish down. All right, guys, this is my 18 3/4 inch fish. I'm going to go ahead and grab it by the mouth. There's the leaderboard. There's my catch board. And the fish has been released. You could also put the integrated identifier holder into it, where your identifier fell down, and you just take your picture, make sure that the identifier is in the photo, and the fish is right there. There's just so much stuff that we can do. How many times have you caught a fish, try to sit there and find somewhere to stick your rod or stick it in your armpit or whatever? Well, why not just a little rod holder? You stick your rod in there while you do all your crap. There's just a bunch of stuff that we're taking from the wade fishing community with wade fishing chest packs, the fly fishing community, the tactical vest community, the plate carriers, the go rucks, and trying to move that. And right now the working name is the OG PFD. And this was kind of assigned to it by one of the people that I'm working with, saying, you're the OG of kayak fishing and you like olive green. So we're going to make it the olive green, the OG PFD, and then at the same time, it sounds cool, right? And so it could be the old guy PFD, it could be the olive green pad PFD, but the idea is that you can have as little stuff on it or as much stuff on it as you want to, provided that it's safe. And then, with the PFDs, the only thing that's been done for fishermen is raise the back a little bit and make two pockets that they call fishing pockets. Other than that, we haven't got a lot of innovation. And honestly, the high back has gone so high back now.
It's on your neck.
That even the lower back pushes up on the PFD. or, because it needs to be higher. But if you make it higher, then it's got to be this damn thick. So we're almost at the point we need to go the other direction and go back to the full back that's thinner, and maybe even some side flotation to hit the minimums. But those are all going to be things we're testing. Those are going to all be things that we're asking for the public's feedback on. I've gone back and forth with the manufacturer with samples 2 or 3 different times, and sketches, and the idea swap about a dozen 2-hour Zoom calls. And so, yeah, it's definitely on the horizon.
Okay. What do you have a release date, like approximate?
I hate to even say this because if I do, I'm going to be wrong because every time you guess. But I'm hoping for spring 25.
Okay.
Cool.
That's dope, man. I mean, I love the modular idea. I mean, that's what kayak fishing is. You can make it as simple as you want and as complex as you want. So it fits right into the niche.
Yeah. I also like the idea of being able to have it inflatable or traditional. And also Matt Collins made a cool little comment here. He said a cutaway option would be great as well, like some plate carriers in the event that you do get stuck and trapped and you need to get them off. It'd be cool if they floated too. That way, if you had anything bulky on you, you could just
every bit of that is going to be an option, up to and including potentially having a portion of the PFD that you remove and throw just in case you're in the boat and you're okay, but the other person needs some additional flotation.
That's dope.
The other thing that the PFD will do, and again, this is an example of me telling you guys, I'm not going to say one thing and do something different. Anybody that served in country or ever worn a combat or tactical harness realizes there's a buddy handle on the back on your shoulders.
I was going to suggest that.
So you reach down, you grab that person to pull them out of the combat. Well, we're going to do the same thing in the kayak, so that if you need to raft up and connect 2 boats together to pull your buddy in, that's one thing. But here's the other thing: we're going to set this thing up to where, because it is a patch panel, shoulder straps, another patch panel, and then potentially even leg loops, you'll be able to take the PFD, you'll be able to take the buddy carrier, carabine it to the side handle, and when the PFD folds out, if you take the flotation out, it's now a ladder. So you can step in the neck, step in the other part of the neck, step on the top of the PFD, and it's like a freaking ladder you can get yourself into the boat with. There's going to be a lot of really cool integration. If you take the PFD and you unbuckle the side straps and you take it off, you can hook the front 2 straps onto like a Yak Attack lock and load base. You can put your knee in the neck part and get yourself that far up to push yourself into the boat the rest of the way. Like, there's going to be so many different little, what I think are clever integrations into this PFD that, I want it to become the standard for fishing PFDs.
Yeah, that's dope, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, me too.
Our little catchphrase right now is we're going to make tactical practical. You know what I mean? We're going to make it look tactical, but everything's going to have a practical application.
That sounds so
cool, man. Yeah, so real quick before we get off the topic of PFDs, what are your thoughts on the waistband inflatable PFDs? Ray Johnson asked this question.
They're the worst. They don't do shit for you. They're a vanity product that makes you feel like you're safe, and you're not. You're better off putting a floaty keychain in your pocket.
Wow. Okay. Good to know. What about overall PFDs, like inflatable PFDs, so the standard over-the-shoulder ones?
I don't have a problem with those. The technology has gotten better and better. In fact, I am more of a fan of the manual than the auto inflate at this point. I've tested a bunch of the auto inflates, and I think they create something of a false sense of security. Right? I firmly believe the manual pull and the manual inflate needs to be a big part of what you're thinking about with those PFDs, because the auto inflate, I would guess they all probably work the first year, maybe the first 6 months. But once you're wearing them in wet, dry, cold, hot, throwing them in the deck system of your kayak, your toolbox, inside your boat,
car,
hot, a hot, wet swampy gear locker when you're done, throwing them inside of a toolbox. I just think that they're less reliable than the manual inflate and the auto. The manual inflate both the CO2 and the breathing tube. And so I'm a big fan of if you're going to use an inflatable, I'm a big fan of having a backup standard PFD somewhere in or on your boat so you can get to it if your PFD fails. Again, big fan of the Type 1 first, and I'm a fan of having an inflatable, even if it's the auto inflate, over nothing. And if you're going to have one of the two, and I'm going to get some flack for this because people are going to be like, well, what if you knock yourself out? The auto inflators, but yeah, okay, if it works. And I firmly believe that the ones where you're going to have to inflate it are more reliable, for lack of a better way of putting it. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay.
I saw somebody wrote here, do some of these kayak bass hole. I'm going to say New Hampshire. That's what that NH stands for. Bass hole. I like that little there. That's funny. All right. So he says, do some of these kayak seat cushions float? Seems like a no-brainer for practicality and potentially helping somebody else. I think that maybe the only reason why they don't do that right now is because of the heat aspect. I know, like, even some of the cushions, if they're not like breathable enough, you sit back down, they're burning your butt. So that's the only thing I think.
And they're not. When you sit on them, you compress the foam, so you kind of steal some of its buoyancy aspects. They're not comfortable, but the seats that are out there, like the kayak cushion, that is definitely not. It's porous, and it definitely isn't going to float. So I know what you're saying, that's a natural, practical thing. I think you're better off having a throwable inside your hatch or right behind you or something like that than you are trying to disconnect your seat while you're sitting in the seat to get and if you don't have it connected, it's a problem. And, a lot of times those things are so slippery. Before Brandon came out with the kayak cushion, I tried to sit on a boat cushion one time, bro.
Yeah.
Every time you look the wrong way, your ass feel like you're sitting on a grease log.
Yeah.
Slide the other side. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've tried it too.
That's not a bad idea though. One of the things that we're going to play around with when we do the PFD, since we're playing around with the integrated inflatable that works a lot like the sleeping pads, we're going to play around with working with inflatables for the seats as well. And that's something that I plan on reaching out to Brandon to show respect for the fact that he's the kayak cushion guy, to say, hey, as we do this, do you have any interest in co-developing a seat cushion that's air, that's inflatable, that's density adjustable, those kind of things. And in that case, it very well could pull double duty if you had a quick release snap on it, especially the one on your back if it's air, because all air floats,
Mm-hmm.
I also thought of one for like the kayak itself. This is something that's just been in my mind. I don't know how, and this came about when I took two buddies out on a canoe that I have. It's a 3-person canoe. And I didn't realize that the seats were sealed for a purpose. The seats were sealed because they were airtight, so that in case it flipped, it could float. Well, I had drilled inside those seats so I could fit some zip ties through, so I could there were like some stadium style seats that I zip tied to anyway. So the boat flips. Thankfully, this boat flipped in shallow water, because the way it flipped, it took on so much water, we couldn't get it out. We had to push it a couple of feet to the edge and then, work it out over time with the 3 of us. Had they been in like 10 or 14 foot of water, they would have fell out, and then the canoe would have sank to the bottom of the lake. So that prompts me to think of like, and you see this a lot on like salvage rescue, where they go down and they strap these like, buoyant balloon thingamajiggers, and then they bring the boats up to the surface or whatever. So yeah, it prompted me to think of a kayak safety kind of slash. I'm
gonna tell you right now, I don't have it on every single kayak of mine. I don't have it on my river. I don't have it on my RS 117, but it is in my power.
Yeah.
But cut up pool noodles and slide them into the kayak in the area where you don't have any intention of putting anything, because that's water displacement and that's added buoyancy, because the thing that's going to make your boat sink is how much water fills up. Well, if there's water displacement in there, then it can't fill up enough to sink. So the oversized pool noodles are the best, the ones that are like 6-inch diameter. Yep. And you just cut them with a fillet knife and then turn them where you wedge them where they're vertical. It adds some deck support. It's one of them old tricks for big dudes to where when you're standing on the deck, it can't flex as much. And then you just take a wood rod dowel and you just tap it down, and then you put another one in there and then tap it down. And then eventually what you have is the deck is short up so it doesn't flex, and however much volume of the pool noodle takes up is how much water you've displaced.
Won't have,
so displacement is the safest way to protect your PFD. And right on the heels of that, if you guys have not seen my video, the 3 fishing things you must have, one of them is a pump. Because when you start taking on water, if you can't get that water out of there, you got a problem. And so a hand pump, a high volume hand pump, is in my kayak all the time.
Real quick, Jay, do you remember that time me and Jay went out one time? It wasn't soon after a storm, but the river was a little high. And me and him decided to go out, and we both anchored up at one point in the river. And I'll never forget this day, because that was the day that I felt, and I, with my hobie, I go out there with the most confidence that I'm never going to tip. That day was real sketchy, because the force of that river.
We should have just went home.
Yeah, it locked up the anchor. I went to pull on the anchor. I couldn't get the anchor up because it was locked down by the force of the river. And so, it was crazy, because I freed myself up and I'm trying to get it and I can't. And the more I pull on myself, the more I'm tipping my kayak. And it was like this much, because I wasn't paying attention, that much close before that water would have just went over the edge of my kayak. And if it just would have went over the front of my kayak, bro, it would have been over. It would have took my kayak, I'd have been flipped. And we did that. It was like end of February, March. So it was super cold. So do you what tips or experience or anything do you have for guys going out on water, and particularly rivers, and trying to be safer in that area, or in those
if you don't have a substantial amount of river experience, one, never go alone. If you don't have a substantial amount of river experience, don't anchor. And I'm not throwing you under the bus here, but the way that you
have never anchored ever.
The way that you retrieve an anchor is you let out double the amount of line that you had anchored with, and then you go back upstream, either motor or paddle, and you pull the line up. As you're passing the anchor, you pull it up. You don't try to pull yourself up current, because the anchor's job is to dig in and hold, and the harder you pull on it, the more it's supposed to dig in. So the way that you get an anchor up is, so let's say that this anchor is dug in this way, and here's the line. If you go past it and you pull it and you fold it over, you actually dislodged it. You can pick it up real easy and throw it back in your boat. So the way that you should traditionally get rid of an anchor is, I take a motor and back the line off and then line up, and then I'll crank up as I pass it. And as I pass it, the line flips it over and pulls it up, and then you reel it in the rest of the way. So
that's good to know.
So by and large, you should always go back upstream, past the anchor, and then pull it as you're coming to it. Same way you should set it. You should paddle up real slow, drop your anchor, and then you should hold your paddle and then slowly let yourself come into place, so that you don't jar and lock it in so freaking hard that it's impossible to get it out later on. So I use the tiptoe technique.
Exactly.
I take the paddle and kind of lower myself back until I'm just on tension of the line, and then I start fishing. But I don't just drop the anchor and let it go and hook me in.
That's exactly what I did. I I was flowing, dropped that ball. I was like, I'm tight. All right. Horrible.
Yeah, I usually try to paddle or motor, ease up upstream, drop it, and then allow myself to go downstream slowly until I'm where I want to be, and then tighten up the line.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know.
My man Ray, he I can tell that you grew up on the Delaware with all those smallmouth you and your family catch every weekend. You guys be killing it.
Yeah, jelly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Chad, what other safety accessories then would you say are like top notch? You won't go without outside of PFD, outside of a safety knife.
Yeah, a line cutter on your PFD, a whistle. A whistle can be the difference between getting hit by a boat, not getting hit by a boat. You can yell your ass off if you're distressed, but it's not directional per se. We don't have a bullhorn on our mouth. Some of us act like we do and think we do, but a whistle's directional. It'll cut through wind. It'll cut through all that other stuff. So literally a high pitch whistle like these ones that are designed for safety. And like, I'm not gonna like get on it, but you don't want the whistles that have the float in them, because just like we talked about with the inflatable, that ball gets inside there, gets corroded, gets stuck to the side of the whistle chamber, and then ain't gonna whistle. You're gonna, so you don't want the mechanical whistle that has the flipper or the flop or the ball or the reed. You want the ones that are basically just air passage. Real simple deal. Mine's always, I could find this blindfolded underwater with one hand tied behind my back. Like, it's that simple. It's on my PFD. But you want these kind that have the little keeper on it as well, so you can slide it onto a strap on your PFD or something. But I'm just going to barely hit that thing. But I mean, if I got on it, if I did the sorry, baby. That thing is so loud that the dog just got up and like, what the hell? But it's so loud that you're going to get heard, and it's unnatural. There's a lot of time you're out on a body of water on the weekend. There's a lot of people hollering. You hollering doesn't sound like anything other than a bunch of people partying and hollering. You blow a safety whistle, it sounds like a police siren. Everybody knows to go, whoa, what's that? And look for it. And so that thing on a couple of occasions over the last 10 years has not, like, in theory saved my life, but in Florida twice. I was in a canal. This dude's coming down the canal and I broke my whistle over his motor. I got on it and he stopped and was like, oh shoot, man, sorry dude, I didn't even see you there. So it's yeah. But somebody said they blew their whistle so hard the ball broke. Don't get the ones with the ball in them. Get the ones that are specifically designed as marine whistles. And look, I'll be honest with you. One thing that is not going too far is to get an air horn. They're cheap. They got them at Walmart. They got them at Academy. They got them at every freaking auto parts store. And the ones that you can pump with the little pump so you don't have to worry about it discharging are pretty sweet. I just don't think you're going to be in a situation unless you have it right there where when you need it, that you can get it in time for when you need it for the most part, So the whistles.
Would you say for like that because I've never heard of the I guess you prime it first and then you're able to utilize it. Would you say if somebody went with that option to ensure every trip before you go out, put that in your little regimen 100%. To make sure you're primed and good to go? Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Test everything.
Yeah, I'm gonna add that to mine for sure.
Okay.
It's kind of like the difference between, and I'm probably going to piss some people off here when I say this, but this has been a theme with me in podcasts lately. But it's kind of like the difference between how a guy drives a car or truck and how a female, for the most part. For the most part, we walk around a truck before we get in it. We kind of look at the tires. We kind of women don't do that. There will be some women who do that, and then there's going to be some dudes who don't. But if you're just going to do a generalization, for the most part, dudes kind of check around their truck. You know what I mean? You're looking at the tires every time you go in and out. Do that, guys and girls. Check your stuff. Look for stuff. I see people all the time sink their boats, and they're in a company that when they post it up, I sank my boat this weekend, and here's the crack, and it's like, damn, dude, that did not crack that day 3 inches. Been cracking. So if you've got a boat that has a tendency to crack in certain places, check it. If you got a boat that doesn't, anywhere that's load bearing, where the seat contacts the frame, check it. You know what I mean? Check it for cracks. Check it for things. I mean, act like your life depends on it, because in some cases it actually does.
It's wild. Yesterday I got out on the water at like 5:30 in the morning, and then I got off around, I want to say, lunchtime. Then I went back out in the evening to another part of PA, went on that lake. As I'm getting ready to drop my drive in the kayak there, I had noticed that something was sticking out further in my drive unit that I've never noticed. Just like you said, oh, that looks a little off. And I noticed it was the pin for my fin on my drive system, and it was missing the little ring. Apparently there was an O-ring on the other side, and that was the O-ring was the security. Thankfully, I had some bigger O-rings in my compartment there for some bigger swim baits that I use if I want to get some more play. I'll throw them on the front, so they were big enough for me to maneuver into that spot. But now that prompted me, I was already, one of those guys I kind of looked over, but now, even a little more thoroughly now, checking on things just to make sure it's all right, because I'd have got out on the water, I'd have started going. Next thing you know, I'd have been going in circles, and then I wanted to know why. And I could have done something silly there. I could have flipped myself or done something, just not understanding what was going on and trying to figure out what was happening. So
I'm gonna tell you a little trick. Every manufacturer at some point has had cracking holes. Bonafide's had it, Jackson's had it, Old Town's had it, Wilderness Systems had it, Hobie's had it, everybody's had it. At certain times, certain manufacturers have a run of it, and then are having it more than others, and then they'll say, hey, that boat cracks a lot. And then you assume yours don't. Go to the internet and Google your kayak and the word cracked hole. Type in PWR 129 cracked hole. Okay. If you get a return and you see a couple of different returns that are the same thing, check that spot on your kayak and check it pretty regularly. Right. And I've had this conversation with a lot of manufacturers over the years, especially when I owned a kayak shop. It's like the faster you can get the word out to the consumer, the less little chick in the sky's falling reactions you're going to get. And it can be caught when it's still manageable. It can be caught when it's still repairable. It can be caught when it's not catastrophic. And so I'll give an example of a boat that's no longer on the market. So nobody gets their pitchforks and torches out and wants to burn me to the ground because I'm, crapping on a particular boat that's out there right now. Jackson had a boat that Jim Salmons worked on them to develop, and they developed a setup where just as one of those things where there was too much load bearing right behind the seat, and there was a area that was cracking. And by the way, that's also why you never name a kayak Kraken. That's the last thing you want to name something that's made out of plastic is Kraken, because it ended up cracking. But anyway, so the Jackson Kraken started cracking, but they didn't want to put it out. And so it was kind of kept hush hush. Well, then more people started having it, and it was kept hush hush. And then more people started having it, and then it was cracked. So if you have a problem, if you see something, say something. You know that old saying? If you see something, say something. Yeah. If you see something, say something. But here's a little trick. Go to the biggest groups out there for kayak fishing, or just go to the internet and search the name of your kayak. Search Old Town Autopilot 120 cracked hole, Hobie Pro Angler, 360 cracked hole. Search some of the popular names, and if there's a spot that's cracking with frequency, inspect the shit out of that spot. You can catch it while your boat's still in warranty versus finding out 3 months after your warranty's over. And two, in a lot of cases, you can do some corrective measures to keep it from getting worse, right? If you got a tiny little crack at a screw hole on the seat foot on a Hobie where it goes into the boat, again, if you can get some pool noodle under that and stand it up and tap it into place, now you got a column right there supporting that. And you can buy the little rubber feet that people like Tim Perkins and some of these other guys have made as repair kits. But inspection and prevention, you know how they say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure? Check your boat. I mean, it's just like I check my fishing rods at least once a month. I take a Q-tip and I go through the guides and I'm looking for cracked guides. There's nothing worse than a cracked guide. Cracked guide is going to show up when you set the hook, got the biggest fish ever. You put just enough flex on it, that guide opens up, your braid slips down into it, and it cuts your line off, right? So I check my line. I check my rod for burrs, for cracks, for things like that. I check my gear nonstop. And I guess that comes from a background in aviation where I pre-flight the shit out of stuff. But check your gear. And if you don't know where to check, just Google it and start checking the high percentage failure locations. And you're going to be safer, period, on the water, in general, like just going to be safer.
That's gold, man. That's gold.
Yeah.
Get your troubles under control. Always have your PFD on. Get a whistle. Get a rescue knife, and a rescue knife that you can get to blind. Like you don't have to look for it or open a box, or like mine's connected to my PFD and it's inside the zipper. So I can stick my thumb in there, pull it out, and cutting will begin. Will come happening.
I got a question for you about your days back. You said what was that? SAR? What? How do I? I don't want to. So back then, in that time frame, we got Ray here. He said another safety people need to take into mind is sun safety. How many times have you? What has been your experience with either seeing guys in either training or in real world circumstances overheating or just not being prepared for the weather, or maybe too cold? Or
the number one thing that I've ever seen in all of my military career was heat related injuries and fatalities, more than combat, more than enemy fire, more than mechanical failure, more than anything.
What attributes to that, do you think?
Training in some harsh environments is part of it, but just not being adequately trained on hydration more than not doing it enough. Now there's now the pendulum has swung so far it's almost overkill to a certain extent. But like think about all the little kids in Little League sports over the last 20 years that you've heard about that died from heat exhaustion or heat stroke on the playing field, and now there's protocols in place, things like that. But protective measures, like I see people all the time talking about not wearing. I don't wear long sleeves and I wear shorts because it gets hot out there. Maybe take a cue from the people who live in the hottest environments on the world.
Yeah.
The people that live in the deserts wear more clothing, not less. They cover themselves completely, not less. So actually, the more exposed skin you have, the more prone to heat stroke and heat exhaustion that you are, because your skin is directly in contact with the sun. The evaporation effect is happening twice as hard. Your core temperature is being brought up. You don't have anything to protect you. But hydration is a big deal. Like, in fact, I have a guided trip tomorrow night, and I told the guy, I just really do not suggest we try to go out during the day. And I even said, hey, can we push it a day? We were going to go today because of the weekend boat traffic and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, absolutely. But look up your body weight and the amount of water that you need per hour at certain temperatures. Jeff Little and I joke each other, but like both of us know the hydration requirements for every 10-degree temperature for every 10 pounds of body weight, from basically 150 pounds up to 350 pounds. And, another safety thing that I'll tell you is when I became a pilot, we almost had to become weathermen because the weather is your biggest enemy. I'll be honest with you, man. I would almost recommend becoming proficient at weather over almost everything else we've talked about, because weather is the number one hazard that we face, especially in vulnerable little plastic watercraft, right? I said something at one of my seminars, and one of the people in the audience kind of joked, "Oh, what are you, a weatherman? What do you want us to become, weatherman?" Yeah. First of all,
I'm glad
the weather affects
I'm glad you brought that up.
The weather affects fishing, and we're fishermen. but it also affects our safety, and we're kayak anglers. So you should know what a rising and dropping barometer does. Which one does what? You should know what the wind switching 90 degrees in less than 5 minutes, what that means. You shouldn't get caught flat when there was all these signs that were telling you some shit was about to happen. You know what I'm saying?
And especially now with all the technology that we have, it's easy to, we have access to all that stuff.
Like I'll give you an example. I use bass forecast for a lot of the solo winter times, and I know what the feeding times are before I get on the water. I keep my finger on the pulse of what the feeding times are. So, but I know that when it's not a feeding time, wading birds are not wading. They're up in trees. I know that they're not flying because they can't eat in the air. So if it's a peak feeding time and I see a bunch of heron vacating a cypress tree and they're flying, and I should ask myself, why are those motherfuckers getting the hell out of Dodge? And I should get my phone out and start looking. But even if I don't have a weather app or a smartphone, there's things out there in the world that the old people knew. You know, my pawpaw used to know, oh, it smells like rain. I better get the grass cut. Before what? My knee's starting to hurt. It's a thunderstorm's coming. That stuff that those older people just knew, those cues are still out there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like if it's the peak feeding time and I see a heron flying, it's time to get the hell out of Dodge. If he's not flying 200 yards to go to another spot, like if he's hauling ass, if he's above the trees and he's going, he's probably not going to another fishing spot. He's getting the hell safe somewhere different. You know what I mean?
No. So what are some of the weather conditions we want to look out for when we're planning a trip or planning on going out? Like what's some of the most important things to look for?
Wind, obviously, thunderstorms, lightning, those are the big three. Wind, rain, lightning. Those are the big three. Lightning, is probably underrated as a potential threat, and not just because of what it brings as the potential of actually getting physically struck by lightning, but what's associated with lightning. You hear thunder and you see lightning way before the dangerous winds and the microburst and all that stuff get to you. So they're basically nature's warning system. It's like that bullhorn that they blow at the dam that says, get the hell out of here. Well, ignoring lightning, and look, just like you told the story earlier, like I'm that guy. I've been out on the water and I've heard something sizzle and look up and my rod tips are arcing because I just was like, I'm going to stay. There's a story in my book where I knew the barometer was dropping. I called a buddy of mine who we had been catching some big fish. And I said, hey man, if you can get off work, all the conditions are lining up right now for the perfect storm of catching big fish. And I drove to his house, not paying attention to the weather because I was just so hyper focused on catching fish. And then I'm unloading my stuff and I'm not paying attention to the wind changing the directions, the air temperature getting a little cooler, all those things that were like trying to tell me, hey, bruh, you might want to take shelter. And so learning to pay attention to and recognize all of those cues is one thing. So become a student of weather, like legitimately. Sorry, I don't know where this is off the top of my head, so I'm trying to find it, but I want to show it to you. I literally caught a fish in this lake, and then the next maybe 3 weeks later, I was going back, and I was trying to go fishing on this lake that we're talking about, and a tornado came through because of all these changing conditions, and I barely made it off of the water, got my stuff together, left the kayak in a ditch, drove around behind his house and hid, and this tornado literally destroyed every house in this neighborhood, and I ran to it like a dumbass. So if you can see on this picture right here, this is me on the lake with a 10-pound bass.
Drop it just a little bit.
And then 2 weeks later, this is that same shoreline behind me. We went in there after the tornado, and all of those houses in the background are gone or in the lake.
Can you raise it just a tiny bit? right there.
I can't see
Wow.
what y'all can see. So yeah,
Yeah,
this is the shoreline where all of these houses over here are, and then now they're the
I can
one
see
big
some trees are even down.
Yeah, the one big tan house is actually in the lake. So that tan house is in the lake right there.
Wow.
And the reason I bring that up is my dumbass went to it. Like I'm like, oh, the barometer's dropping. The wind has switched to the perfect direction for all the things that I was looking for fishing.
Yeah.
But those things also meant something else in the world of weather that I didn't know enough about back then. So like a dumbass, I was the guy running into the burning building because I saw smoke and thought they were having a party, you know? And so knowing weather can save your ass. And knowing weather is a really big part of being a better, more consistent angler, you know?
Yeah.
Knowing dam releases, knowing lake releases, knowing river releases, knowing flow rates. Here in this area, we use the TVA app a lot for the release schedules on the big dams for the Tennessee River, but there's things like Go Paddle and other apps that are out there, River Runner, that basically tell you the flow rate, the release schedules, the numbers that you can call. And it sounds like a lot of like extra hassle, but man, if you're not doing that kind of stuff, you're really not putting yourself in the best position to be safe and to be successful. This app right here, this Go Paddle app, it's a bad ass app to have for what we do. This app right here, Windy, is a badass app to have for what we do. Those two apps right there are like must have. This is going to tell you where the wind is coming from and what the wind is going to do the rest of the day. It's literally called Windy, W-I-N-D-Y. Go Paddling is the other one. And those apps are not, you know, if you live on the Tennessee River, if you don't got this one right here, you are wrong. It's called the TFA or the TVA Lake Info app. It's got release schedules. It's got the flow rates. It's got all that kind of stuff. And so those are all factors that you just have to take into account when you're in a vulnerable watercraft like we are in kayaks.
I've seen, for example, I've seen some guys who run, like there's a guy on YouTube who runs a Hobie, and he had like, and I'm not sure what it's called, but it was like the weather module scenario situation. Yeah. And I thought that was fun. Like, I can't wait to get one, but I thought that was really interesting. Like the one day he was on the water, and then he was like, yeah, let me, cause kind of just like how you're saying, he started noticing, you know, the environment was telling him stuff was going on. And so he went on his unit and he went to go see what was coming, and he could see what was happening. He was like, oh, you know what? We better cut this trip short, because due to what he was seeing,
anybody over 55 right now, if is watching, is laughing at you, because everybody over 50, I'm 49, but everybody over 55 had one of those things on the wall when they were growing up. My papa had a weather gauge on the wall. Okay. And he had a rain gauge that showed how much rain you got each day. Would go out there and dump it out on. Now we can get all that stuff from apps. But but that thing that you're talking about, all that is a shrunk down version of the weather unit thing that old people used to have on the wall, just to tell them that fronts are coming, storms are coming, and all this other stuff.
Really?
It's just a shrunk down version of that. Oh yeah.
And it just communicates with you, because he was able to see, like, it was like a radar image as well. Yeah. So, but that's all that is.
Yeah, on the NOAA app, I didn't really want to get into all this today, but I'll go ahead and I'll show you.
Because on the NOAA app, I was looking for a cheat around that, so I get that.
So this app right here called Climb, which is the NOAA app, the National Oceanographic, whatever organization. You can go into the settings and you can set warnings for wind. You can set warnings for fronts. You can go in and customize this stuff to where you'll get notifications when fronts are coming, thunderstorms. Like, you can go in and set it to as much or as little, information as you want, right? So, like, for example, if you look at this right here, this pin that I got set, it's saying wind is west-northwest at 7.9 miles per hour. The wind speed is this, and then here's the barometer, right?
Oh,
so it's telling you everything, and you can even customize this little widget. And then you can take that arrow and say, okay, now I'm fishing this lake right here, and I know which wind which shorelines are going to be in the wind and which shorelines are going to be out of the wind, which coves are going to be in the wind, which coves are going to be out of the wind. So to me, it's almost silly, like, to take all that stuff into account. And my son brought it up. He said something about it just because it's second nature to him, because he grew up around me and other guys talking about this kind of stuff. But he said something. We were on a fishing trip about 2 or 3 weeks ago where we fished with somebody else, and the guy came over to me. He's like, dude, your son's talking about wind direction and what shoreline is getting the wet. And I was like, yeah, but that was foreign to him. And I'm like, man, you're half of the equation is not in the math problem that you're trying to solve if you're going to the water and don't know that stuff. If you're not thinking about that stuff before you go, you know what I mean? The whole know before you go thing.
Yeah.
So, weather is your friend, and it can also, and sometimes your friends kick your ass. You know what I mean? Sometimes your friends punch you in the face. So just think about weather that way.
We're over here smirking because Jay said Chad is gonna make me work to make this live stream family friendly, because of the random. It's all it's all good.
What's funny is on my own stuff, I never do that, and I just like completely over here.
No, you're good. We love that you feel that comfortable, so it's not even really.
Well, he's already here, so I wasn't gonna say nothing. But usually, what happens is, Chad, I will send an email all nice to the guest, and it says, "Make sure you keep it family friendly." Da da da. Well, I didn't send that to Chad. I just texted him the link. So Chad didn't get the heads up, so that's all on me.
It's kind of Jay's fault, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Look, so what was funny is I said we need a beat button, and now we got some ideas here, or a safety whistle, a dolphin call. The list goes on.
I like the dolphin call.
Yeah.
Or just tell a knucklehead, hey, bro, keep it family friendly. So.
Nah, it's all good. Like I said, man, this is a part of the 18 and older section of the podcast.
Yeah, right. Bass after midnight.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah. So no, dude, that was I love that the app information, because that is a lot of stuff to stay on top of. But you got to be informed at least with the basics when we're going out there, and it also depends. Like if you're fishing big water, if you're fishing rivers. We don't fish that many big lakes out where we're at. But we're close. We're not that far from the Great Lakes, and a lot of people that do offshore fishing, and that weather can change like that. It's incredible how fast that weather can change.
Especially if you have big bodies, because I hear like bigger bodies of water have their own climates, right? Go ahead, Chad. You were saying.
Yeah, for sure. You ever watch guys getting ready for a game, and they're, especially football players, they're putting on something, leggings. Then they're putting on the pads, then they're putting on their socks over their legging socks. Then they're putting on the ankle brace. Then they're putting their shoe on. And they're taping up, right? They're putting on the eye black. To me, checking all these things that we've talked about is all part of the pregame ritual for going fishing. And it's just something that you should naturally do. And if you don't do it, you're going on the field without your cleats, so you're going to slip a lot. You're going on the field without your eye black, so you're going to be blind. You're going on the field without your gloves, so you're not going to have good grip. And so to me, these things are part of the process, and they're part of being successful. I was on the lake the other day, and I was trying some places where I was looking for fish. I knew where some fish were. I knew based on all of the conventional wisdom where they should be. I went everywhere else. Could I have safetied up and went and caught 30, 17 to 20 and a half inch fish? Absolutely. But what would I have accomplished by doing what I already know I can do pretty much on demand at any given time, and I'm not learning anything? So I went out and explored. I went out and tried other things. I always love it when somebody else is catching fish and they're looking at me and I'm not catching fish, and they thinking somehow they're getting ahead of me. I'm like, I'm just getting intel from you for free, but I'm focusing on something else, right? And so to me, the pregame stuff, though, is almost like non-negotiable. Like, you got to know the wind. Hold on. You ever go to the water without checking the wind? Do you check it on the water, like, incessantly? Yeah. So this is a 24-year-old, like, knucklehead over here in the corner. Now, granted, he has been trained pretty well. You know what I'm saying? But anyway,
Yeah.
There's certain things you just do. You know what I mean? Like, you know.
Real quick, I want you to continue, and I don't want to cut you off, even though I'm cutting you off while I do this. But, you know, Chad is absolutely right, guys. One of the biggest old school, and I learned this from Roland Martin, actually. If the wind's blowing north, do not go forth. If the wind is blowing south, put the lower in their mouth. If the wind is blowing east, they're biting the least. And if the wind is blowing west, the fishing's the best. And if you're not going out there understanding which direction the wind is flowing, these little old timer things aren't gonna help you out there. And those are things that I've seen it work when I've checked the weather, like you're saying, or the barometric pressure when it's low at 29. I mean, it's key. You know, those are key moments where the fish are biting. So
we should have done this. I should have been on the water for this. I want to show you all a couple things, but like, I also want to caution you against some of these rules. Do we got 5 more minutes?
Yeah.
Sure.
Some of these rules are problematic. I'm about to demonstrate one of them, and then I want you to realize that this can be applied like universally. There can be exceptions to the rules. So you got to know why the rule exists before you just blindly accept it. Okay. So we're going to say old men are going to tell you this. So we're going to call this the shoreline over here, right here. Okay. This is the wind direction. Okay. And because of the way that I drew it, this is east and this is west. Okay. So they're going to say if the wind is out of the west, the fishing is the best. The wind is out of the east, the fishing is the least. Well, that's because during most of your fair weather fishing time, let's just say that this is, like I said, this is the west side. This is the east side. So the wind's out of the east because wind direction is referred to as where it's coming from. You follow me? Not what it's hitting. So wind direction refers to where it's coming from. So if they say the wind out of the west, fishing is the best, where? On a lake that's oriented north and south, or a lake that's oriented east and west, or a river, or a creek, or where? And so here's what I like to do. Okay. I like to say to myself, what effect is the wind having on this shoreline? Is the wind warmer or colder than the water? And is that going to produce a favorable or unfavorable condition? Okay. So right now, let's say that the wind is blowing to this shoreline. Okay. And it's 90 degrees outside and the water temperature is 86 degrees. It's going to blow all of the phytoplankton, all of the microorganisms on the shoreline, which is going to bring the filter feeders. It's going to bring the crustaceans. It's going to bring the brim. It's going to set the food chain in motion, right? But let's say that this is fall, and let's say that this shoreline is getting the sun, and let's say it's also getting the wind, but there's a northern coming in, and the wind is out of the north. And so now that this is, the wind's out of the north and it's hitting the shoreline, it's bringing the coldest wind. It's skimming the coldest water. The coldest water is the heaviest. So that cold water is coming with the wind. And because it's the heaviest, it's going to sink down through the water column. It's going to bring debris up off the bottom. It's going to make irregular water temperature because it's all jumbled up. And the agitation over here is that the heavier water is forcing the warmer water back out deeper because the cold water is heavier, and it's creating a temperature inversion.
Wow.
So in that argument and in that example, the wind out of the same direction is beneficial in one scenario and detrimental in another scenario. So in the spring, wind is out of the east, fishing is the least is bullshit. Because most of the time nor'easters are when your cold fronts come in, and nor'easters turn into easters, which turned into an east wind. So if I was just sitting at home and I looked at the weather and I saw east, winds out of the east, fishing is the least. Okay. If the wind's out of the east, it's hitting the west bank. So the east bank is clean, and the east bank is going to get sun last. So what I'm going to do is get up later, go fishing later, and go fish for those fish that are on the non-windblown side in the warmest water, because it hasn't been hit by that northern, and it's going to get sun the longest because sun rises in the east, sets in the west. So the east shoreline gets the sun the longest in the evening. So to me, that kind of stuff is like common sense. And that's the kind of stuff that I taught my son and I taught my friends, and I've been taught by my friends growing up, so that when you're assessing where you're going to go, what you're going to throw, and how you're going to go, it doesn't fall under 4 simple rules. And so I'm not contradicting what you're saying.
No, that's amazing. No, that's amazing.
What I'm saying is all of those rules have a good foundation and some truth. So here's an example. Winds out of the south, put it in their mouth, right? You've heard that one, right? Well, because what they're saying is it's not a northern wind, because the northern fronts, the fronts come out of the north, right? In the fall to turn us into winter, and in the spring until we become spring, all of your cold fronts come out of the north, right? I always think this is funny too. I didn't know that people don't know that in the South, all of your thunderstorms and weather comes from the West. I was having this discussion with somebody, and I was like, he said something. He's like, well, it depends on which direction the weather's coming from. I'm like, what weather? Well, the thunderstorms. And I'm like, do you mean like what angle? No, what direction? I'm like, man, in the South, all your thunderstorms come out of the Gulf, up into, and then go at an angle up through, they come in either Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, sometimes Alabama, and they go at an angle up through the Tennessee River Valley, up into either the Ohio River Valley, if there's a high pressure system, or a low pressure system, I should say, or a high pressure system keeps them down. They turn and go right through the middle over to Virginia, North Carolina, sometimes even Georgia, South Carolina, but they always go the same way. So why that makes sense is that if the thunderstorm's coming through and it's moving pretty fast, just look at the weather to the west of you and see what it's doing and see how big of a gap you got. And if you need to get the hell out of Dodge and go home, or if you just need to tuck up into a boat dock and wait till the next window, because, you can look at the speed of the storm, how fast it's moving, and see how far it's got to go and know how long you've got. Speed equals distance over time. If it's moving 15 miles an hour, and it's 15 miles away, you got 1 hour, little simple stuff like that.
Yeah.
But knowing what the weather tendencies are, in my opinion, is one thing. Knowing what their effect on the fishing is another thing. Like, so for example, if thunderstorms are projected for 4 days and they're just going to be rolling through, fish need to be comfortable. They don't like turbidity. They like a set comfort. They're actually more comfortable in an uncomfortable temperature that's steady than they are in a comfortable temperature that's up and down and all over the place. So they'll almost always seek out comfort and oxygen first over, or consistency over straight comfort, right? So where are the fish going to position themselves if it's going to storm for 4 days? Well, they're going to be somewhere in some water that's deep, adjacent to some shallow water to pull back up, but they're not just going to ride it out in 2 foot of water. So find yourself some 2 foot of water, 4 foot of water next to some 20 foot of water, right? This is where you hear the old rules, 20 for 20. They need to be within 20 yards of 20 feet. I hate rules, but that's a pretty decent one sometimes, especially if the air temperature, water temperature is changing more than 20. So the 20 for 20 for 20 rule, the air temperature or water temperature is changing more than 20 degrees. They want to be within 20 yards of 20 feet of water. That's like a good starting point. And I've heard that as rules, but once you know the rule, you can figure out the deviations.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Once you know what the strike zone is, whether it's going to catch the corner or not, whether to swing, even if it's slightly outside or not. And to me, knowing those parameters is huge. And it was even further exemplified to me when I read the book Knowing Bass from Dr. Keith Jones, the guy that developed Gulp and Max Scent and a bunch of other stuff for Berkeley. because he was a fisheries biologist, a fisheries scientist, and he specialized in largemouth bass. And instead of like guessing, he tested everything. If a conversation came up in the Berkeley headquarters, he would say, all right, let's not debate it. Let's test it. You know what I mean? And he talks about the physiology of bass. One of the physiological factors of bass and why night fishing is so deadly is they don't rely on sight as much as people think they do, because they don't see just the way we see. We see with our eyes, we feel with our skin, but our skin doesn't give us a optical manifestation of what we feel. So if you've ever heard of the character Daredevil, you know, he was deaf or he was blind, so all of his other senses filled it in. So when bass are blind or they can't see as well, their other senses compensate, and vibration gives them an optical image of what they feel. So they see with their lateral line. They confirm a lot of times with their eyeballs, and their eyeballs are large more to protect them from predators than for them to seek out prey. So what's crazy about it is that when you find these situations where you can put a bass where all of their advantages are in play and all of your disadvantages are downplayed, you put yourself in the best possible scenario for tricking that bass. The other thing that's cool about it, and Austin put this in play when he caught this 10-pounder about 2 weeks ago, is that when you're out night fishing and you're kind of cruising along and you're graphing, you're getting that optical image in your brain of where these fish are positioning themselves, where they're staging themselves, where they're set up. And if you do it 2-3 days in a row and you say to yourself, well, those fish are up on that flat at 10 o'clock in the morning, but they weren't there at 9 o'clock last night. So then you go back out the next night and say, okay, are they there at 10 o'clock? Are they there at 11 o'clock? Are they there at 12 o'clock? Well, I'll be damned. They moved up there at 5:30 to position themselves to move up on that flat as soon as it got daylight. Well, when you start picking up on stuff like that, the other thing that night fishing does a great job of for you is you can go out and you can start patterning the fish by saying, I know where these summiches are, and I know where they're going to be, and I know where they're going. So he actually motored up to me and goes, I'm going to go over to this spot, been seeing some fish outside this cove, know they're going to move up in the cove, but it's off peak, so I'm going to throw a bottom bait. Had you even thrown a bottom bait before that? Literally had not thrown a bottom bait, but put the pieces of the puzzle together by going out 2 or 3 nights in a row, said, I found some big fish on the graph, couldn't get them to eat. I'm going to go to this pocket. I think they're going to move up in this pocket, but I'm going to go to a bottom bait. So I let it sit there and it stays in the strike zone and see what happens. Caught a 10-pound, 3-ounce, 10.3 pound bass because the pieces of the puzzle were being put together because you're looking for them and you know how they fit. And to me, if you're not learning bass physiology and you're not learning weather, you're doing a lot more hoping than catching. You know what I'm saying? And a lot more fishing than catching. And I don't want to sound conceited when I say this, but I can go catch fish anytime. If I ever get skunked, it's on purpose. Meaning I was willing to trade a day of catching for a day of learning.
Yeah.
But if I want to catch them, I can catch them. You know what I mean? I did that stupid shit with the I did that stupid stuff with the catch 22 with the knucklehead. I was going to be at the right place at the right time under the right conditions, had it all patterned, had it dialed in, and Wendell slid in ahead of me and caught the fish I was planning on catching when it was catchable. I just was waiting for the perfect time. I actually outsmarted myself during that event. And you can do that. But knowing the factors, in my opinion, makes it so much easier to put the puzzle together. And there's 3 guys in this industry that do a really good job of that. And when I ask them, I don't ask them just where do they go. When I do my post-tournament interviews, I'll say, all right, man, so when you made the move, where did you go and why? And the why part's as important as the where part. And, I had Russ Snyder's was down here for the Gunnersville tournament. I've already told this story once or twice, not on a podcast, but he tried to go fish Lake Wheeler just to get away from everybody, but it was kind of tough. And he called me at like 10:30 in the morning. Hey, man, I was going to do the best I could to try to go to Wheeler, catch him over there, show a little love to Wheeler, and not make it all about Gunnersville. But I wasn't finding the fish where I needed them to be. So I need to go check this other spot, but I want to know if this marina is inbounds. And I said, no. And he goes, cool. Now I'm not going to out his logic or where he went, but here's what he said. Well, I guess I'm going to have to make it a 1.5 mile run because I found this, and this to be true. And the only place that I can figure the fish are going to be in that situation where they're going to position this way where I can catch the quality that I need is right here. And the only way to get there is to either launch at that marina or go to this other boat ramp that's almost 2 miles away. But that's where the fish are going to be, not because he had been there, but because he theorized it based on experience and checking some other spots. And he said, I'm just going to go there. Cool. Glad I now didn't waste my time driving to that boat ramp to find out that it was out of bounds or that it was private. Goes to the other boat ramp, drives to the spot, gets there at like 11:45, wins the tournament. Fishing too. But again, it's about the factors that he took into account, the experience that he's got, and the application of that experience, and also, if you ever go film and you watch this guy fish, he very seldom makes a cast that it isn't like, I'm going to catch one on this cast. It's not a lot of, or if he's making a lot of casts, he's fishing a stretch of stuff and he's saying somewhere on this stretch, I'm going to catch them because I don't know where they are here, but I know they're here, and I know this is how to catch them. And so to me, if you start thinking that way, you'll catch more fish. You'll be more fulfilled. You'll be happier. And if you don't go home after not catching fish, like perturbed and wanting to get on a map and figure out why you didn't catch them, what you could have done different to catch them, and it don't eat at you to go back out there and punch them in the mouth, even if there is nothing at stake, no tournament, whatever, it's over. I'll tell you one other thing, and again, I'm not trying to blow this kid's head up, but like we go out there and he catches a fish. It's only like a 6-pounder. The first thing he thought of after he got the fish off the line was, oh, let me run over there real quick and find out why that fish was there. In other words, he cast there, he caught the fish. Most people are going to be happy with that. We're just barely done with the picture, and he's like, hold on, before I forget, let me run over here. So he goes over there and he's graphing over it and he's marking away. Oh, shoot, this is what it was. But now he knows, now I got to look for more of that. And the next time he's there, he knows that spot's there to do that same thing again under those conditions. And so when you catch a fish, you should also ask yourself, why was that fish there? Mm-hmm. And I'll ask everybody in the audience to ask themselves this question. And if you don't do this, this might be the simplest thing you can do to improve your fishing. If you ever see fish blowing up on the surface and you start casting and you're hooking them up and you're just really happy with the fish you catch because they're blowing up on the surface, then you're only going to catch them when those conditions exist, which don't happen that often, right? But immediately after some fish chase some bait up and they blow it up on the bank or they push it up on the surface and they start, as soon as you're done catching them and you're done with the kind of the pandemonium part, the next thing you should do is dissect the shit out of that area and say to yourself, where were those fish when they weren't blowing up that bait on the surface? Were they out in 10 foot of water on a brush pile? Were they on a ledge? Were they behind a log? Were they on some rocks? Like, where were they? Well, then you don't have to have them blowing bait up on the top to catch them. You can pull up to a pocket and go, well, last week they were here, blowing bait up on that bank because it was a shad spawn. But there's a rock pile right here. There's a brush pile right over here. It's off peak. There's a heron over there with his leg tucked up in his belly, his beak tucked in his chest feathers. So it's off peak. So I got to put it right in their face, and I got to let it sit there, and I got to shake it, and then I got to let it sit. I'm not going to catch them on a chatterbait, a spinnerbait, a buzzbait. I'm going to catch them on a jig, a worm, a tube, a drop shot, something that sits there in their face and irritates them. Okay, where is that? Well, 9 times out of 10, if you dissect an area after you catch a fish, you can show yourself where they were. You can convince yourself where they were. And then the next time you come there, you feel like you have the secret decoder ring to fish him, because you see a boy over there in the John boat, just easing down the bank, making a cast. And he's just happy to be casting. He's happy to be out of the house. He's happy to be doing what he's doing. But you pull up behind him, let him get out of sight, cast out there, drag that jig until you feel that first tree limb, and then you go, huh. And it doesn't surprise you then when you see your line start to swim off. You're like, oh, yeah, fish on.
Yeah.
That's catch, not fishing.
Dude, there's so much gold in this, man. We came here to talk about kayak safety, and we did. But anyone that's tuning in now, y'all take the last 25 minutes and just replay this over and over, because there was some gold in there, bro. So I appreciate that, Chad. That was a old school, experienced, put in the reps knowledge.
For real. That's that gold
and
stuff.
Man, I'm gonna be honest with you, Jay. I really want to take a pivot to this stuff on my YouTube channel, to where the videos are more like seminars on how to catch them, instead of just look at me catching fish. You know what I mean? Yeah. And when you really think about it, that's what they're going to YouTube for, is mostly for the information, not just the entertainment.
Yeah.
We can
they're
make
trying
shorts
to solve a problem. You have to have the solution to the problem.
We can make all the shorts in the world with topwater blow-ups and skipping jigs and setting the hooks and stuff like that for the quick entertainment part. But really the part that intrigues me and that I love to teach is the part where you figure out those little nuanced things.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Those little subtleties. You know what I mean? Like, I'll tell you what happened last week, and we can get off here after this, but I motored past this point and I saw these fish on the point going here. I'll draw it out.
We're definitely going to have to do another episode where it's just like how to catch them.
So I'm going down the main river channel at this fishery, and there's a rock pile with a brush pile next to it right here on this point, right there. So I see these fish and I cast to them. I position my kayak like right here. I cast to them like 20 times. I came around over here, trying to do this back. Came over here, started casting this way. Couldn't get them to eat, but I'm getting them to react. Now, this is on structure scan and 2D. This is not some forward-facing sonar shit. But these fish are out here on this rock pile. So I go by there about every hour, and I go by there 4 times. And about 2 hours before daylight, I motor past it, and I'm going this way right here. And I see it on my side scan. So I'm going this way, and I see it on my side scan. And there's no fish now on this rock pile. I keep going a little ways, and I don't see them anywhere down this shoreline. So I was like, oh, yeah. I looped around, came back to here, started casting into that pocket, and I caught 5 fish on 5 casts on a chatterbait. So what I was able to do is say to myself, I saw these fish staging on this combination of some rocks and a brush pile, and I tried to catch them, but they weren't catchable. They would respond. They wouldn't eat. I tried to put the bait in there and let it set to get them curious, to get them, to hit it for a reason other than hunger. But I tried all of the other reasons, and there's 8 reasons a bass will attack something other than including eating. So 7 others, 8 total, and you should research that if you don't know what they are. And you hear the phrase reaction strike. What you don't hear is aggravation strike. So sometimes you can just aggravate them some bitches into eating. But I had tried all that. So now I go back over there at the feeding time, and they're not there anymore. Well, I go down the shoreline and they're not there anymore. I'm like, well, then they got to be in that cove. So I loop back around and start casting in there. Boom, fish on. I call Austin, bro, I got like a 20 and a 19 and a half and 2 casts. He's like, I got the same thing. I'm over here in a different spot. I was like, all right, cool. Because I was going to call him and say, come over here and we can whoop up on him. He's like, I got the same thing. And then I asked him what he did, and he told me what he did, and he did pretty much the exact same thing, but just different. He had done it backwards. He had gone into the coves. They're not in the coves. They're out on the thing. He's way more of an offshore fisherman, a lot like Gene, more so than I am. I can do it. I'd much rather do the shallow thing. I'd much rather figure out how to catch them shallow and where they're going to be shallow, because let me break this down for you. They are going to be shallow somewhere at some point everywhere in the summer. It's just going to happen. And it's just going to be one of those things. Is it when all the boat traffic is subsided? Is it in the middle of the night? Is it the middle of the day when, again, the boat traffic is subsided? Or is it a combination of those things? I like sight casting. I love seeing fish before I hook them. Love it. I love the cat and mouse game of calling my shot. Hey, I'm about to catch this. Hey, you want me to show you what this 5-pounder looks like? And then flip over there and catch it and then show the person. And they're like, you mother, whatever. I'm actually starting to dig the whole figuring out a spot in 15, 20 foot of water and doing the same thing, because it's technically the same puzzle. You're still putting the pieces together. It's just a lot more boring to me. I can do it. I know the theory. I have the technology. I just don't like it. You know what I mean? It's not a political statement about forward-facing sonar or not forward-facing sonar. I like the mystery. I like the having a pretty damn good idea there's a fish there, just not actually seeing the sumbitch on a graph. You know what I mean? But that's also kind of hypocritical, because I love seeing them shallow and casting to them and watching them eat it. But to me, that's still different. I'm actually seeing the actual fish. I see that green gold flash. I see that white mouth, and oh man, dude, I just
get excited.
Tug is the drug, baby.
Yeah, baby. So I'm really more of a person that will say, well, if I can't catch them that way where I'm fishing, I'll just go somewhere else. I'll go to a different lake, a different state, a different place to catch them how I want to catch them. But to each his own. If I was a tournament fisherman and it was allowed, I'd have 4 of them on my boat. And if you don't, you're a fool. And don't hate. You know how they say don't hate the player, hate the game. That statement has never been more true for any application, in my opinion, ever. So what I get mad at with these discussions is the people targeting the angler, right? The Randy Blockett, calling them spotlighters, calling them cheaters, no, dude, they're not cheaters. Like, I'll be straight with you. If I was a professional fisherman and you had a YouTube channel and you called me a cheater and I actually followed the rules, get that bleeper thing ready if you have it, the public. I'd whoop your ass. I'd go to your house and I'd whoop your ass. Because you're attacking my character, you're attacking my integrity, you're affecting my potential way I make a living, and you're doing it so you can get some clicks and some views and make some BS argument that has no foundation to it. Cool. Call Bass the worst organization in the world for allowing it. Call Major League Fishing the worst organization in the world for allowing it. But if you call the individual doing it a cheater when they're following the rules, man, that's just a line that back in the old days you didn't do that for fear of, finding out what your teeth taste like. And I just feel like there needs to be a little bit of that accountability for the information dissemination, because if you're calling somebody a cheater who does something professionally for a living, that's just not cool, man. And that's the part that frustrates me that's not being brought up in any of these arguments, is that, dude, you're literally calling somebody a cheater. You're saying they have no integrity. Oh, they couldn't catch them any other way, whatever. The fact is, it's the rules of the game they're playing. So don't hate the player. hate the game and complain about that. But when you go so far as to make your mouth up to bash somebody and say that they're a cheater, it is slander, it is defamation and all that. But, this is more of a court of public opinion instead of a court of law. And it's just a matter of like handling stuff old school. But, I get it that you don't like it. I get it that you don't think it's fair. The definition of fair is simple. There's only one definition of fair that can be applied universally, that the same rules apply to everybody. I went through this with the motor thing. Oh, it's not fair. You can go buy one. I can't afford it. Whether you can afford it or not doesn't have anything to do with fair.
Yeah.
The guy that has the motor on his kayak may have slept in his car, may have worked an extra shift, may have driven all night to get there, maybe gave up pre-fishing, maybe, didn't get a good night's sleep, didn't eat a good meal, didn't do all those things because he wanted to put that competitive advantage in his favor for that piece of gear. But yet you drove a more comfortable car, had a graphite rod, you could feel you had more sensitivity, you slept in a nice, over double stuffed bed at the Hampton Inn, you had, 3 cups of coffee before you left, you have whatever, right? Fair is so subjective that the only way it can be defined is the same rules apply to everyone. And right now, in professional bass fishing, the same rules apply to everyone. If somebody's kicking your butt within the rules, they're not beating you because of technology. They're beating you because they're better at the game that you're both playing.
Yep. It's agreed. Yep. That's a good way to close it out.
I'm going to say that one more time as a dude with a gray beard and not some old guy just jumping on if you are getting beat right now in professional bass fishing by a technology that you can also use, you are not getting beat by the technology. You're getting beat by the person who's willing to work harder and apply the technology, and they are better at the game that you are both playing at that time.
It's very true.
That's right, bro. And I mean, like everyone, this is one of those hot topic things. So, we won't jump into it fully, but and it's funny, Lucas from the Outdoor Conquest just came in right now. He could talk about live scope all day, bro. But and I think Randy Blockett, he's entertaining. I like the guy. He's old. He's old school. He don't want to change his mind. But you're right, man. You're going against you're going against their integrity when they're not cheating. They're using every advantage that's made available to them. That's also made available to you and everybody else that's competing. So if you don't want to,
it's not even about changing his mind, because if I thought that was the case, I'd even try. And he's getting what he wants. We're even talking about him right now. He doesn't believe what he's talking about. He doesn't believe what he's talking about. And I'm going to make that point in one simple analogy. His biggest argument is, well, these guys that are getting out there and they got 30 years of experience and this, that, and the other, and this other guy can just come along and just be at that level. It's not fair. But yet he sells lake breakdowns with all the waypoints for all the lakes that he breaks down that he's fished on his website, where you can download the waypoints, plug them into your GPS, and you can watch his video series on how to fish the lake, so you can get all that experience. So it's okay for him to charge for it, and it's okay for him to sell that information, but it's not for Lowrance, Humminbird, Garmin. So it's not because he disagrees with the technology. He just disagrees with who's getting the money for it, because he's a firm believer in technology. He's a firm believer in using technology like 2D, DSI, side scan, structure scan, whatever you want to call it, and creating stuff to sell. He's just mad
on the allure of the idea of catching fish, like, and I see that now, the way you point that out, because it's like, hey, don't go figure this out on your own, and don't do this way, because the more you do that way, the more you take from me, a guy who, I'm an ancient guy. I helped start this thing. This is, and I could kind of, see that kind of bit of perspective now, which I've never really noticed before. Up until you really bringing that up. I always thought, especially with the comments that Hank made, God I can't remember his last name right now. You know,
Hank
the
Carter.
guy. Yep.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I will say that I agreed with Hank upon was the ideology that there are certain technologies that could exist in other areas of other sports and how they don't allow those things to change for the idea of tradition. But if that was the case, then would we have these new lures? Would those be permitted? Because that's a form of new technology as well as the gear and all that, right? The boats themselves, everything has evolved, everything has advanced. So to what point of restriction are we really talking about here, right? And at the same time, too, these things have to come out with a trial period, if you will, you know. And back to the point that you made, you know, is everybody playing the same game? Are all the rules the same? Yeah. So, you know, I guess it is fair to a certain degree. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Lucas has something for you, Chad. He says, allowed 2 motors in KBF, time for a change. And he threw that in there with $4.99 super chat.
So
My man.
Here's the thing about the 2 motors thing. I'm not opposed to the 2 motors. I'm opposed to exceeding the manufacturer's recommendations on the boats. So what you guys have to understand is that I am not just a tournament organization. I'm the tournament organization that pioneered this stuff. I'm the one that had to have the conversations with the insurance companies. I'm the one that had to have the fights with the DNRs to get permits for the events. I'm the one that had to say that these are what the standards are, and this is what I'll do to get these things. And a lot of other organizations got to benefit from that. So a lot of these folks were not there for these conversations. And a lot of these conversations were predicated on, you know, we're not overweighting our boats. We're not having multiple motors. We're not going to have electrical fires. We're not going to have these things that, you know, make your insurance through the roof.
Yeah, because at that point, we might have to bring like fire extinguishers on board.
Yeah, 100%. But the biggest thing for me is that I configured 4 or 5 of the most popular fishing kayaks out there, and to configure them with 2 motors and the necessary batteries and the necessary gear, we're knocking on the door of the manufacturer's recommendations. Now, I'm not throwing any manufacturer under the bus here because I called them all. When I say I called them all, I called them all. A lot of people don't know this, but I can probably pick up the phone and call the top person at every kayak company, even if I don't work with them. Just because I've been in this game a long time, it's very incestuous. This dude used to work for this company, and like musical chairs, they've all moved around. And I've just kind of built that rapport by working, you know, over 500 trade shows in this industry. But the manufacturers universally would not rate the boats for 2 motors. So when they're too scared to rate the boat for 2 motors, when they're the one with the product liability insurance, you know, as a manufacturer, you can't expect me to go out on a limb as a little tournament organization and say, I am going to allow you to exceed the manufacturer's recommended or suggested limit on this watercraft, because then in doing so, I become liable if you do that. And I encouraged you to do that and then said, oh, you can't be competitive unless you do. So the inferred endorsements there, because of all the other statements I've made about the only definition of fair is the same rules apply to everybody. So I'm kind of a victim of my own words, but I'm also very systematic and analytical and do things the way that I do them, because you just can't, as a tournament organization, I can't wave a magic wand and say, you guys can exceed what the manufacturer says. You can't. It's just not something that I could do.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, yeah, and hopefully we'll see when that happens. But we got to wrap up. This is the longest we ran this show, by the way. 2 hours, bro. So you set 2 records. First time you came on, you were fishing. My only guest to fish while doing the podcast and catch fish.
Yes.
And now the longest one, bro, at 2 hours. But before we go, first we got to do the funny or crummy segment. But also there's one comment that I just want to bring up because I think it's really important. Michael S. He says, I want to thank Chad for the info he passed out about the Catch 22 program. Survived from becoming one of the 22 twice. That's why I'm getting into bass fishing now. So if anyone that doesn't know about the Catch 22, where can they find out about this and participate?
The easiest way to find out about it is to go to kayakbassfishing.com. The Catch 22 Challenge is a banner on the homepage. Click on that, and there's a product or there's a series description link on the event page, or you can go to kayakbassfishing.com/fishops, FISHOPS, and there's an explanation of how everything works. We announced the winner last night because it was the 22nd on the Bearded Paddler page with Andy and the gentleman I called him right before the show to tell him that he won the kayak. He was like, look, man, I'm blessed beyond measure. Give the kayak back. I want to give the kayak back because I believe in what you're doing so that you can give it away again. And dude, I was like doing the whole face thing and got goosebumps all over me. And yeah, so there's entire videos about the Catch 22 Challenge, what it is, linked up on the Fish Ops page, and it's linked up in the Catch 22 page. The easiest way to find it is go to kayakbassfishing.com and go down about halfway down the page, and there's a Catch 22 Challenge banner, and that'll take you right to it.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, good. That's important stuff, man. So thank you again for doing that. Let's get into the crummy or funny segment, the funny and crummy segment before we wrap up real quick. Before we do that, just another quick shout out for the premier sponsor, Lead Time. Again, I've told you guys I've used them for this whole season. I've had my 12-volt 100 amp hour smart battery on my Autopilot 136. Absolutely been super impressed with this battery, especially for being a sub $310 battery and having that Bluetooth technology. Really, really dope. So big shout out to Lead Time for being, again, the premier sponsor for the Yak Chat and actually selling a really good product that's reliable and made for everyday anglers that don't want to drop $900 on a battery, on a lithium battery. So guys, check them out in the show notes below, and also use code BDF6 for 6% off the entire order. All right, so Chad, I don't know if you know how this funny or crummy segment works. So we've been getting dad jokes the entire time throughout the chat. So I'm gonna put a couple of the funniest ones on here because we actually got quite a bit today.
Yeah, we got a lot today.
Yeah, I saw them coming up. So you're gonna tell me, Chad, if they're funny or crummy. So first one is from Ray Johnson. What do you call an old snowman? Water.
I'm sorry, that's good. I was holding it off because I could read. I mean, not read at the same time, so I could get a real reaction.
All right. All right. Mactoon says something about snow theme here. Mactoon says, what's the difference in a snowman and a snow woman? Snowball.
Sorry, that's kind of more on the. It's good, but it's on the crummy side. It's
all right.
It's low hanging humor.
That's good
low
to
hanging. All right. Another one from Ray Johnson. Who invented the round table? Circumference. All right. Let's see. Bassac words, right? Before crowbars were invented, crows had to drink at home.
Oh, okay.
All right. Yeah, you got to think about that one for a second.
That was a late reaction for me. I got that.
You gotta think about that one for a little second there. Cotton candy kayak. Why don't dads trust atoms? Because they make up everything.
Okay.
All right, a little science joke.
Okay.
All right, Caro Berg. I guess this would be a mom joke. Caro says, "Why did the fish blush? It saw the lake's bottom."
Okay.
All right. All right, this one made me giggle a little bit. All right, I told my wife she should embrace her mistakes. She gave me a huge hug.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right, last one. Cotton candy kayak again. What do you call a bear with no teeth?
A gummy bear. That's one of my favorites. Yep.
Nice.
Oh,
people don't know this, but I actually wrote jokes I actually paid my way through college writing jokes and doing stuff like that. But I can't think of one that I could actually tell on this thing. But one of the more popular shirts that I did, the guy that I used to write jokes for the website called me up to do a t-shirt thing. And I said, I came up with one based on this this thing we did in the Navy when we would go out to bars. And it's I'm not a gynecologist, but I'll take a look. So if you've ever seen that shirt out there,
that's good. Got a hawk to it. Oh, speaking of, you know what?
No. I don't want to bring that here, bro.
No, not that. No, watch what I'm gonna say real quick. I just, as we're closing out, I just want to throw it out there. Unfortunately, I heard that young lady lost her job.
Really?
Yes, I heard that apparently she was, I don't know if a private school teacher or something along those lines. She might have taught grade school, but it's really unfortunate that happened because she was hanging out, just minding her business at some clear, like either, night strip area where it was obvious that there was young people out having fun. She was just doing her own thing.
It was downtown Nashville. That was Nashville. She was downtown Nashville. On the street. Yeah, they do that all the time.
Yeah, and she didn't say anything vulgar or anything like that. She seems like a sweet Southern gal who just kept it up front and real and who was enjoying the night out. And she didn't intend that thing to go viral. She had no part in that. You know what I'm saying? And at the end of the day, she was outside of her job function. Isn't this America? Don't we have the freedom of speech? Don't y'all hear the freedom?
The internet the internet did what the internet does, bro. It blew it up.
She should be capitalizing on that stuff right now, like the Cash Me Outside girl. Remember the Cash Me Outside? That was a billionaire.
Yeah, she got money now.
I hear she's getting a lawyer to combat this because it's
it's too late. You needed to have jumped on that bandwagon, on your own bandwagon early on.
Well, I guess as a byproduct of her being let go or forced to resign. But anyway, I just wanted to give my thoughts out there on that because we are a internet show, and that is a little bit of what's going on.
Trust me when I tell you. Somebody is going to reach out to her and offer her a job if she got fired because
I get that's another thing the internet does well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, her retribution will be swift. Awesome episode.
Yo, Chad, thanks again, bro.
Think about getting a lure company where you can get the Hawk 2 edition where that lure is already spit on. You know what I'm saying?
Ironically, I even got to capitalize off of it with the reel. Just put not tutorials be like Hawk 2 got spit on that thing.
Yeah. So, and by the way, Austin called you out. He's like, "Damn it! I was halfway done with the reel on the knot thing, and then freaking Juan got that thing." He's like, "Damn, yeah." He was literally working on it. He was literally working on the knot when you came out. He's like, "Look at this." I was like, "Dude, it's probably gonna be fit together." But
well, you know what's funny? I rushed it myself because I was worried for the same exact thing. I said, if I don't get on this thing quick, somebody else is going to. So
he was trying to make it all perfect. I was like, dude, done is better than perfect on the internet.
Yeah, I rushed it 2 seconds and it was over. So
yeah. All right, guys. Yo, I appreciate it, man. Absolutely. Thanks for coming. Yep. Thanks for coming through, bro. We'll have you on again and drop some more knowledge. Yo, for everybody watching, make sure you guys get it on your calendar, July 7th. We're talking to Alex Folguera about kayak rigging. And if you know Alex and you watch some of his videos, he's funny, entertaining, and I'm sure it's going to be a great show. So make sure you guys get it on the calendar, July 7th. So till next time, guys, appreciate you. Peace and God bless.
Thanks.